The stars slowly drifted across the black sky like small white sparks. The deep silence of space wrapped around the ship, asterisk Solara to asterisk, making even the soft hum of the engines sound loud. Inside the command room, Captain Laura Briggs stood by the large viewing window. She watched the calm stretch of space, her reflection faintly shining on the glass. Laura was a woman of careful thought and calm strength. Her uniform was neat and her hair was tied back. She had guided her crew safely through storms of space, dust, and magnetic fields. But now, something in the still air felt wrong. Behind her, Engineer Caleb Warren sat at his console, checking the power flow on the large blue screen. He frowned as he tapped a few more keys. "Captain," he said, "the left engine is still dropping in power. It's steady one moment and weak the next. It's not normal." Laura turned slowly. "Can you fix it?" "Not yet," Caleb said. "It looks like it's not the engine itself. The power core is sending uneven signals. Maybe a damaged connector or a small short. I'll find it." Before Laura could respond, Communications Officer Nora Price looked up from her comm screen. Her voice was uneven. "Captain, something strange is coming through. I'm getting a pulse signal faint, like an old radio call." Laura walked closer to her. "Can you clean it?" "8. I'm trying," Nora said as she adjusted the dials. The sound filled the room, a low crackle, followed by a faint repeating tone. Then words began to form inside the noise. "Crew in danger. Power. Fail. Help for a moment." No one spoke. The staticky voice repeated the same broken message again. Caleb leaned closer. "That's an Earth code. An emergency code. But no Earth ship is supposed to be anywhere near this zone." Laura folded her arms. "Location." Nora typed quickly. "Coordinates are 72,000 kilometers away, near the dark rim of this sector." "Set the coordinates," Laura commanded. "Can't ignore it. Someone out there needs help." The navigation computer began calculating direction and speed. The quiet tension in the room grew. The ship turned its nose toward the unknown point, engines glowing faintly. While the asterisk Solara to asterisk shifted course, far away on Earth, inside the tall silver buildings of the Space Command Center, Colonel Mason Reed stood before a large wall screen. Lines of red and green signals flashed across the map of outer orbits. Among them, one tiny red signal blinked in a fading rhythm, old-fashioned emergency beacon. A younger officer ran to him. "Sir, this signal just came through the deep space relay. It matches an Earth emergency code, but it's sent from beyond the patrol line." The asterisk Solara 2 asterisk just answered it. Mason looked at the screen. His face tightened. "Deep space rescue? They'll need backup." "Who can we send?" the officer asked. Mason didn't answer at once. He remembered a name, not one printed in official records, but whispered in the halls. There was only one man who had flown beyond those limits and returned with a ship still in one piece. He looked at the flight list. "Gone." "Contact Vince Turner," he said quietly. "Etley, tell him we have a rescue call." Back in space, the asterisk Solara 2 asterisk continued toward the signal. The crew moved with quiet focus. Caleb double-checked the sensor panels. "Temperature drop ahead," he told Laura. "There's debris, maybe from an older vessel." Laura nodded. "Reduce speed. We'll scan the area first." Through the front window, bits of frozen metal floated slowly by, glinting under the faint light of distant stars. The ship moved carefully through the field, and the distress signal grew louder, still broken but stronger. "Please. Anyone? We lost power. Need assistance?" Nora's hands trembled slightly. "It's close now, Captain. Less than 200 kilometers." Laura's voice stayed calm. "Prepare the searchlights. See what's left." The ship's lights cut through the darkness. A cold shape began to appear, long, silver, and silent. It was another vessel, larger than theirs, floating without movement, half buried in shadow. Its nameplate was scratched, unreadable. Caleb whispered, "It looks empty." Laura took a deep breath. "Keep your eyes on it. Let's find a stable point and scan for life signs." A soft beep filled the room as the scanner ran its cycle. Then Nora spoke, her voice soft but filled with surprise. "Captain, there are faint human signals. Very faint. But they're alive." Laura nodded slowly, her eyes set on the silent ship. "We're not leaving until we bring them back." Outside, the stars moved in quiet watch, and the two ships hung close to each other in the endless dark. The old distress call still echoed between them, fading in and out of the radio like a heartbeat, proof that even in the farthest corners of space, there was still a voice reaching for help, and another ready to answer. 2 days had passed since the distress call reached Earth. The sky over Nevada stretched wide and golden. The runways of Flight Command headquarters shimmered with heat. Inside a long hangar, a man in a flight suit leaned under the open wing of his small starship. His name was Vince Turner. Vince was tall, with calm gray eyes that never missed a detail. His ship, named Aurora, had saved lives before. It carried scratches from storms and rescue runs, but its engines still purred like something alive. Vince wiped the sweat from his forehead and tightened a bolt with care. He liked fixing his own ship. Machines behaved better when you truly knew them. A loud step echoed behind him. Colonel Mason Reed entered the hangar, his dark uniform stiff and sharp. "Vince!" he called. His tone was clear but carried a weight that warned of something serious. Vince stood, wiped his hands on a cloth, and smiled slightly. "I figured it was you," he said. "You only come when the world's trying to fall apart." Mason gave a faint grin, but did not relax. "We caught a human distress call from beyond the outer edges of the Orion Belt. A crew out there is stranded. It's engine failure, low oxygen, no way back." Vince's smile slowly faded. "People out there? That far?" "Yes," Mason said. "The ship Solara 2 found them, but their power systems are unstable. They called for backup. You're the only one who can reach them fast enough." Vince nodded, already moving toward the control panels. "Send me everything. I'll be up there before the engines cool." Mason watched as Vince ran pre-flight checks like a man who had rehearsed courage all his life. "Vince," Mason said, "this might be dangerous. The ship's signal came through damaged channels. I'm not sure what happened to them." Vince checked the fuel readings. "If someone sent a call for help, danger isn't the question," he said. "Send the coordinates." Soon after, the alarm lights on the hangar ceiling turned from blue to red. Aurora's engines woke, glowing with a low hum that grew to a thunderous roar. The ship glided out into the bright air and then rose, climbing fast. Dust swirled across the ground as it broke through the clouds and into the dark sky beyond. Once they cleared the orbit, Vince switched the controls to manual. "Course locked," he said. A voice answered from behind him, a woman's voice, steady but friendly. It was Dana Lewis, his co-pilot and oldest friend. "So they finally sent you on another trip to nowhere," she said, strapping herself in. Vince grinned. "Into nowhere? Yes. But this time, we're going to bring somebody home." Dana adjusted the communication line. "Did they say who's in trouble?" "Not exactly," Vince replied. "The automated records said they were humans' crew on some research mission. The Solara 2 intercepted their signal. That's all I know." They moved through space at high speed. The stars flowed past like rivers of white fire. Hours blended into one another, the skies outside dark but filled with movement. Inside the cockpit, Vince kept his eyes fixed on the readings. "A temperature drop ahead," he said. "We're close to the outer line." Dana leaned over to look. "I can't believe people came this far out. What were they even looking for?" Vince shrugged. "It's probably the same thing we always look for. Something new, something worth knowing." A soft chime rang through the ship. The long-range scanner found traces of a metallic mass ahead. A faint pulse flickered on the radar. It was weak but steady. "That's it," Vince said. "They can see their beacon." They glided toward it slowly, cautious. The light from their ship washed over the dark shape of another vessel drifting without power. Its hull was covered in scratches, its surface bruised with frozen dust. Dana whispered, "Looks like a ghost ship. Looks like people still waiting for someone to show up," Vince replied. He moved the ship close and activated the magnetic locks. The airlocks connected with a thud. The lights flickered and turned dim. Vince grabbed his helmet and checked the readings. "Life support minimum," Dana said. "Their air's thin. If someone's alive in there, we don't have much time." "Then we don't waste it," Vince said. They stepped through the docking gate into the silent corridor of the stranded ship. The air was cold enough to sting. Their boots echoed against the metal floor. All around them, the ship was dark. Loose wires hung from the ceiling. Small lights blinked weakly like tired eyes. Vince led the way toward the command deck. He found a console still glowing faintly. The ship's name came up as Solara 2. He pressed the command key, and a short log appeared. The last entry was made by Caleb Warren, the engineer of the missing crew. His recorded voice came through the speakers, weak and shaking. If anyone finds this message, it said, our energy core failed. Captain Briggs stayed awake to send this call. The rest of us are in stasis to save air. Please, help them, Dana whispered softly. They're still in stasis. We can save them, Vince. Vince nodded. Then that's what we'll do. He looked around the silent deck, the flickering screens, the frost forming on the corners, the quiet hum of machines trying to stay alive. He could feel the life still clinging to this place, waiting to wake again. Somewhere deep in the ship, the faint rhythm of slow breaths moved through the air. It was the sound of hope that had refused to die. Vince placed his hand on the console and said softly, You sent your signal. We heard you. You're not alone anymore. The long hallway of the silent ship stretched ahead, filled with dim light and cold air. Vince Turner and Dana Lewis moved carefully, their footsteps making small echoes that rolled through the emptiness. The air smelled stale, like metal and ice. Every few steps, a loose wire swung softly above their heads. Dana checked her wrist scanner. Oxygen levels low, she said quietly. If this ship's been without power for long, we have only a short window. Vince nodded. Then we move fast. The crew's in stasis somewhere near the command deck, that log said. We get them out and bring the life support back before the systems crash. They followed a narrow passage until they reached a large door marked with red lights that blinked weakly. Vince pressed the control panel beside it. Sparks flared, and the door moved halfway open before stopping. He forced it with his shoulder until the gap was big enough for them to pass through. Inside, the room glowed faintly from the emergency lights. Rows of cryopods stood like tall glass coffins covered in frost. Inside each one, a sleeping figure rested still, breath fogging faintly on the inside of the glass. In the front row was a woman in a captain's uniform, Laura Briggs. Dana stepped closer and wiped the frost from the glass. She's alive, Dana said softly. Look, the vitals are weak, but they're still there. Vince looked at the control board beside her pod. Systems running on backup cells, he said as he scanned the data. But the power's almost gone. If we don't restart the main generator, they won't last another day. He moved to the nearest console and started checking the core connections. Most of the circuits were shorted. Dana handed him a small repair tool. Think you can fix it? Vince gave a small smile. Fixing broken things is what I do best. While Dana checked the remaining pods, Vince opened the access panel beneath the main console. It's a mess of wires spilled out, some burnt, some frozen. Connected his power link from his suit to the damaged system. The lights flickered again. Sparks jumped, and the hum of energy began to stir weakly through the air. Dana looked up at the ceiling lights as they blinked on. It's working, she whispered. Just a temporary link, Vince said through gritted teeth as he twisted another wire. Once the core wakes, we can stabilize it. A low, uneven roar echoed through the ship's hull. The sound grew louder, followed by a warning tone. Vince frowned and checked the panel. Reactor core's unstable, he said. How bad? Dana asked. Bad enough to blow us into stardust if we don't balance the flow? He ran across the room to another terminal. Keep monitoring their levels. Dana nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. Got it. Vince worked quickly, fingers flying across the controls. He rerouted the remaining energy from non-essential rooms to the stabilizers. The ship shuddered, and several lights went out, but the hums slowly steadied. He felt the metal beneath his hands start to warm again. A small green light on the pod board blinked to life. Main system online, said a robotic voice through the speakers. Dana clapped her hands together, half in relief, half in disbelief. You did it? Vince gave a small laugh. Let's hope she says that again when the engines kick in. They both turned toward the cryopods. One of them began to warm, the frost melting away. The woman inside the captain moved slightly. Her eyes fluttered open a little, dazed and confused. Dana ran to her side. It's okay, she said softly. You're safe now. We're from Earth Command. Laura Briggs opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out hoarse. How long? Too long, Vince said gently. You're lucky your emergency systems held this long. You found your signal. The captain's eyes focused slowly on him. He answered the call. Vince nodded. Yes, ma'am. We're getting you home. Tears formed in Laura's eyes, but she smiled weakly. My crew. They're alive. Vince looked at the other pods. All of them are stable. We're bringing them back one by one. She tried to sit up, but her strength faded. Be careful, she whispered. The core is damaged. Vince's face tightened. I know. I just patched it enough to wake the ship. The deck trembled again underfoot. A deep rumble rolled through the metal frame. Dana checked her scanner, and her expression turned nervous. Vince, the stabilizers are failing again. The temperature's rising. The core's overheating. Vince bent over the control board and read the numbers rising rapidly. We're out of time. If it melts down, we all go with them. He looked back at the pods. The team was beginning to stir inside their glass shells, their systems slowly waking as power returned. Dana, he said quickly, you get the captain and the others ready for transfer to Aurora. I'll handle the core. She hesitated. Can't do that alone. Vince smiled a little. Sure I can. Just need to do what I always do. Make things work when they shouldn't. Dana gave him a long look, then nodded and began unlocking the pods, starting with Laura's. Vince ran into the lower engine room. The heat was rising fast, and sweat rolled down his face. Steam burst from a broken valve beside him. He opened the core panel again and reconnected his power link. The lights flashed a bright red, then slowly faded to orange. Outside, Dana guided the waking crew out toward the docking gate. Laura glanced over her shoulder as they moved. He's still down there, isn't he? She asked weakly. Dana held her by the arm and kept walking. He said not to worry, she said quietly. He'll make it work. Far below, the lights in the core room grew brighter. The sound turned into a deep, constant hum. Vince adjusted the last circuit, and with one final spark, the reactor finally balanced. The trembling stopped. The heat faded. He smiled to himself, breathing hard. That's better, he said softly. You're alive now, old friend. Up above, as the lights fully returned across the ship, Dana's communicator buzzed with his voice. System stable. Prepare everyone for return. It's time to go home. Relief filled her smile, and for the first time since they arrived, the ship no longer felt like a tomb. It felt alive again, with the promise of rescue glowing quietly through its halls. The lights of the ship glowed with a faint gold color. The air, once still and cold, now felt warm and alive. Vince Turner stood near the engine deck, breathing hard. His suit was marked with small burns, and his hands were covered with dark smudges from the repairs. The sound of the running core filled the air, now steady, strong but not quiet. Vince looked up at the ceiling and listened to the rhythm of the engine. It was better, but not perfect. Something deep inside the main chamber still made a strange pulse. It did not sound normal. He sighed and wiped the sweat from his forehead. I can fix noise later, he said softly to himself. Right now, people are waiting. He climbed the metal steps that led back to the upper deck. When the door opened, Dana Lewis was there, helping Captain Laura Briggs and the rest of her crew out of the cryopods. The crew looked weak and pale, their eyes trying to adjust to the light again. Laura's voice was quiet but firm. Is the ship stable? For now, Vince said, but it's holding on thin wires. We need to get you all to Aurora. It's safer and smaller. We can tow this ship home from there. Caleb Warren, the engineer from the old crew, stepped forward. His voice was tired but calm. We can help. I still remember the power lines here. Vince shook his head. You just woke up from hibernation. The last thing I need is someone fainting over a loose cable. Let me and Dana handle the system transfer. Y'all focus on breathing again. Dana gave him a small half-smile. He's right, she said kindly. He likes working alone when everything's falling apart. The ship trembled suddenly. Everyone turned at once. Faint noise rolled from the lower decks, followed by a quick flash of red light through the metal floor panels. What? Laura asked. Vince frowned. Pressure lock in the lower reactor room. He ran back to a side control panel and checked the readings. The numbers danced in red. Heat level rising too fast, he said. That core wasn't happy about waking up. Dana's eyes widened. Does that mean what I think it means? Yes, Vince said. Electrical fire, maybe containment leak. If we don't fix it, The ship burns from the inside. He moved toward the door, grabbing a toolkit. Laura tried to stand, but she was still weak. You did enough, she said. You already saved us. Vince smiled at her. Saving's not done until everyone's home. He turned down the corridor again. Right. Dana followed him, unwilling to leave him alone. The sound grew louder as they went closer, low, rough, and alive, like a growl. When they reached the lower chamber, the smell of smoke was thick. Small sparks burst from a broken valve, lighting the dark walls in flickering orange. Overheat in the containment line, Dana said, reading her wrist monitor. Vince nodded. We have 10 minutes before that spreads to the core. He ran to the main valve, trying to release the pressure. The control knob refused to turn. He applied all his strength. The metal groaned but stayed tight. Move back, Vince said. He took out his small power cutter, switched it on, and sliced into the bolt, forcing it free. The valve loosened, and a loud hiss escaped as steam flooded the room. The air was hot now. Dana covered her face and coughed. Vince, you can't stay here long. He didn't answer. He moved to the control panel and typed a sequence. The core began to adjust its energy flow. The red warning lights faded to yellow. Dana watched the numbers climb, then settle back down. The shaking stopped. The engine's hum smoothed into a steady rhythm again. He turned toward her with a tired grin. Told you it'd work? She smiled back. You keep saying that like it's always that easy. Suddenly, a loud crack split through the hall. Pipe overhead burst, dropping sparks. Vince pulled Dana aside just in time, shielding her. The sparks burned his sleeve, but he didn't let go until the danger passed. You're really trying to get yourself cooked today, Dana said breathlessly. I'll take a sunburn over losing a ship full of people, he replied. They both laughed lightly, their voices echoing through the smoky air. Then Vince turned serious again. The systems are stable now, but we can't stay. Let's move them to Aurora before something else decides to break. When they reached the upper deck again, Laura and her team were waiting by the docking gate. The corridor lights lit their faces softly. They looked tired, but their eyes were bright, a mix of fear, hope, and disbelief. Vince opened the access gate between the two ships. Cool air from Aurora swept in, clean and calm. All right, he said. It's way home. One by one, the crew crossed over. Caleb stopped before stepping through and looked at Vince. You risked a lot for people you didn't even know, he said. Vince smiled. That's what rescue means. When the last person had crossed, Dana sealed the gate. Through the window, the asterisk, Solara to asterisk, drifted quietly, its lights glowing faint but steady, like a patient catching its breath. On the bridge of Aurora, Vince sat in the pilot's seat and began the return sequence. Engines active, he said. Brace for departure. Laura stood beside him, steadying herself against the console. You're quite something, Turner, she said softly. He tilted his head. I just fly and fix things, Captain. The rest is luck. She smiled at that, her voice lighter now. Then may your luck never run out. Aurora pulled away from the damaged ship, its engines cutting bright lines through the dark space behind it. The stars outside looked close enough to touch. Vince looked out the window as the light from the distant sun touched the edges of the ship. Time to go home, he said quietly. And even though the void around them was silent, it felt warm with life again, fueled by the beating hearts of those who refused to give up. And by one pilot who never ignored a call for help. The ship Aurora moved quietly through the open dark of space. Its engines hummed like distant thunder, steady and low. Inside, the rescued crew finally began to breathe freely again. The air felt warmer here, cleaner, and filled with a faint scent of metal and oil. After days locked in frozen silence, the sound of life returning was almost music. Captain Laura Briggs sat near the viewport, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her eyes followed the stars drifting by outside. She had dreamed of them while in the cryo chamber, not sure if she would ever see them move again. Now they seemed brighter, as if the universe itself was welcoming her back. Vince Turner sat at the front of the control deck, hands resting on the flight wheel. His face was calm, but his eyes looked sharp and alert, always checking lights and readings. Dana Lewis sat beside him, flipping a few switches to keep the navigation straight. The two worked together with quiet rhythm, like they had done this dance 100 times before. Laura broke the silence with a soft voice. I keep thinking about the moment before we froze. Didn't believe anyone would find us. The message we sent," she stopped and smiled faintly. "It was our last try." Vince turned a little in his seat. "I heard it," he said, faint, almost lost among the noise. "Sometimes the weakest signals are the ones worth chasing." Caleb Warren, who had been resting by the far wall, chuckled. "So you're the kind of man who listens to ghosts whispering through static?" Vince smiled. "Only the stubborn ones." The crew laughed quietly. For the first time since waking, they sounded alive again. Dana handed Laura a small cup of hot drink from the console warmer. "You'll feel stronger after this," she said. "You've been asleep for a long time." Laura accepted it and nodded in thanks. Warm steam rose between her fingers. "You know," she said slowly, "when I heard your voice saying we got you, it felt unreal. Like I was still dreaming." Vince leaned back slightly. "Not a dream," he said. "You're going home. We're all heading there." Caleb looked at the glowing planet now visible at the far edge of the screen. It was small still, pale blue, wrapped in clouds. "Home," he whispered. I never thought that word could sound so good. Time passed quietly as the aurora moved across the final stretch. Outside, the stars shifted slower, and the glow of Earth grew clearer and larger. The ship's lights dimmed for descent, while inside everyone fastened their belts, though none could stop smiling. Flight Command Center on Earth had been tracking the ship since the moment it turned toward home. Technicians cheered as the signals grew stronger. Colonel Mason Reed stood before the main monitor, arms folded, a rare smile creeping across his face. "He did it," he said softly. Vince Turner actually did it again. When the aurora broke through the atmosphere, streaks of orange fire slid along the hull. The whole sky looked like it burned around them, lighting their faces inside the cockpit. Dana kept her eyes on the instruments, voice calm. Temperature holding, hulls stable. Vince nodded, his voice steady. Almost there. His hands guided the ship with care, every movement controlled but sure. At last the glow faded, replaced by the bright blue curve of oceans and clouds. A soft cheer filled the cabin. Ship glided over familiar ground and landed smoothly on the long runway of Nevada Command Base. As the engine quieted, silence returned, but this time it was a peaceful silence, the kind that follows victory. The ramp opened and sunlight rushed in. Warm air touched their faces. The rescued crew walked out slowly, weak but smiling. The gathered officers and medics watched with relief and wonder. Cameras flashed, people clapped. The lost explorers of Solara II were finally home. Laura Briggs stopped at the foot of the ramp and looked back at Vince. He was still at the top, half in the doorway, the wind moving through his short hair. "You're not coming down?" she asked. "Soon," Vince said with his easy grin. "I like to let the heroes go first." She shook her head with a laugh. "You're impossible, Turner. People keep saying that," he said lightly. She reached up and touched his shoulder. "You saved us. Every one of us owes you more than words." He looked down at her, his voice simple. "You sent a signal. I just answered it." Reporters surrounded the rescue deck, asking questions, filming everything. Yet, for all the noise, Vince stayed quiet, watching the rescued crew reunite with the people waiting for them. He saw Caleb lift a small child who ran to him, crying with joy. He saw Laura walk toward the officials who would one day tell their story to the world. Dana stood beside him, smiling softly. "So," she said, "another mission wrapped up?" Vince shrugged. "Till the next call." She gave him a gentle look. Not everyone would fly into the dark just for a voice on a broken signal. He laughed lightly. "Maybe, but that's where I belong, the places that still need someone to show up." Later that night, when the hangar was quiet again, Vince walked back to his ship. He ran a hand along the smooth edge of its body, still warm from re-entry. A small group of engineers had left a plaque by the door. It read, "Asterisk, for every faint signal, there will always be someone who listens." Asterisk. Vince smiled as he read it. Somewhere, far beyond the stars, another ship might one day send another cry for help. And when that time came, he knew he would be ready again. He climbed into the cockpit and looked at the distant points of light scattered across the sky. He whispered quietly, "As long as someone calls, I'll be there." Then he leaned back, closed his eyes for a moment, and let the hum of his ship settle into his heart, the sound of a promise kept. The night outside the hangar was calm, and above it, the stars seemed a little brighter.